the next 2 hours on Trial Story.
I ran around and shot my mom.
Where did you shoot her?
I just reached over and I shot her close.
I was just firing as I went into the room. I just started firing.
In what direction?
In front of me.
What was in front of you?
My parents.
These brothers did what they did, and they should be accountable.
These kids love their parents. And you don't kill your parents if you love them unless you are forced to.
Next on Trial Story, a special 2-hour presentation. The Menendez brothers on trial, the real story.
It was a story that captured the imagination of America. It was a story that had all the elements of fiction. Two brothers living in Beverly Hills, with access to the best schools and a lifestyle most would envy, commit the most primal of acts. They kill their parents. It was a story about parents and children, which ignited a national debate about responsibility and forgiveness. How and why did Erik and Lyle Menendez do it? Who should we believe? What does the evidence show? In the next 2 hours, Court TV will take a rare look at this case, a chance to explore with jurors and lawyers key moments that can help us understand just how the decisions were reached.
The court finds that the jury is hopelessly deadlocked and declares a mistrial.
By now, most everyone knows the outcome: 2 mistrials. But what we will never know is exactly what happened on a quiet night, August 20th, 1989, in this manicured Beverly Hills neighborhood, behind the closed doors of the Menendez family home.
What's the problem? What's the problem? Someone killed my parents.
At 11:47 that evening, a 911 operator took an emergency call. It was a call from Lyle Menendez, reporting that his parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, were lying dead in the family den. When police arrived, they found few clues, no murder weapon and no eyewitnesses. What they did find were 2 bodies shot until they were almost unrecognizable. Lyle and Erik Menendez said they came home to find their parents dead, and the older brother, Lyle, led police to believe the mafia might have been responsible. At the memorial service, the brothers seemed to be at a loss and spoke about their father's success. Jose Menendez was a self-made Hollywood contender, a Cuban immigrant who worked his way up from dishwasher to entertainment executive. His wife, Mary Louise, known as Kitty, was a former beauty queen. As Jose climbed up the ranks, his family moved with him from expensive home to home, first in Princeton, New Jersey, and later in Beverly Hills. The brothers spent much of their childhood on tennis courts and at country clubs. They seemed to enjoy their father's success, but by 1989 there were visible cracks in the Menendez family, trouble in the marriage, and trouble in the household. In 1988, Lyle Menendez was suspended from Princeton University for plagiarism, and that same year, Erik Menendez was implicated in a pair of burglaries. As a result of those burglaries, the brothers were sent here to the offices of a psychologist, Dr. Jerome Oziel. Ironically, it was through Oziel that the investigation of who killed Kitty and Jose Menendez broke wide open. It turned out the brothers confessed to Dr. Oziel that they killed their parents.
Mr. Erik Galen Menendez, do you understand the charges against you?
I understand both of them, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Joseph Lyle Menendez, do you understand the charges against you?
Yes.
7 months after the shootings, Erik Menendez, 19, and Lyle Menendez, 22, were arrested for killing their parents, a charge they denied adamantly for over 3 years as they sat in jail awaiting trial.
They wanted the life, they wanted the lifestyle, and they didn't want the parents. And since they couldn't divorce them and keep their lifestyle, they had to get rid of them.
Pamela Bizanich has dedicated much of the last 3 years of her life to this case. As the lead prosecutor, she contends the Menendez brothers killed their parents out of hatred and greed.
This is a really simple case. The defense has done an excellent job of trying to muddy the waters, but this is classic textbook premeditation, and that's why it's a first-degree murder.
That's what it was supposed to be, an open and shut case of cold-blooded murder. The state would argue that the brothers planned the shootings, purchased the weapons, set up an elaborate alibi, and then went off on a spending spree. But the case turned out to be anything but straightforward. Just weeks before the trial began, lawyers for Erik and Lyle Menendez dropped a bombshell.
They were in imminent danger of death or great bodily injury at the hands of their parents.
The brothers did an about-face. They went from publicly denying any knowledge of the killings to admitting they pulled the triggers. The reason was equally shocking. The brothers said they killed in self-defense after years of sexual and emotional abuse by their parents. It was an unusual defense.
These people put this in operation. They terrorized their children. They made them that frightened. And as far as I'm concerned, morally, they're hardly in a position to complain that it worked too well.
Attorney Leslie Abramson is representing Erik Menendez. She has a fighter's reputation in the courtroom, having saved many of her clients from death row. Jill Lansing, a former public defender, is Lyle Menendez's lawyer.
I remember the first day I met him at the jail, and I said the same thing to him that everybody else always asks me, oh, it must be really terrible given the lifestyle that you've had to be in jail. And his answer was, in some ways it's easier than living at home.
Lansing says that Erik and Lyle Menendez grew up scared of their father, Jose. The brothers say their father raped them. Lyle says until he was 8. Erik says the sexual abuse continued until just before the killings.
They saw unending cruelty, no affection, no warmth, no love, no caring, no nurturing.
The brothers claim that when they threatened to reveal the family secret, their parents plotted to kill them. They say they had to kill first to avoid being killed themselves.
I obviously truly believe they would have never done this but for the fact they believed that they were going to be killed. It makes no sense. There's absolutely nothing they had to gain by doing this.
People have to be held accountable for what they do, regardless of how they're feeling, because there are a lot of abused people who don't commit crimes.
Our criminal justice system asks jurors to find solutions to difficult problems, problems that we as a society have yet to resolve. The challenge for the Menendez jurors is to decide how to balance our traditional rules of legal responsibility with new notions about what makes people tick.
I'm very calm. I don't know why.
As the trial begins, the media takes over.
I keep saying to myself, why aren't you nervous today? I think it's because I know this case so well.
Breaking arm there?
And you'll need a scorecard to keep up with all the lawyers. Co-counsel Michael Burt is assisting Jill Lansing, and Marcia Morrissey will back up Leslie Abramson. And teaming up with prosecutor Pamela Bazanich is Lester Kuriyama.
I've lived this case. I've lived their lives for 3.5 years. So there's nothing to be nervous about. I know it.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Judge Stanley Weisberg presides. He's no stranger to high-profile cases, having tried the first Rodney King case. He's allowed one camera, a robotic camera, to record the proceedings.
We'll now proceed with opening statements, first from the
Prosecutor Pamela Bazanich lays out the state's case for first-degree premeditated murder.
We will prove to you that Lyle Menendez planned this murder, provided false identification for the purchase of 2 shotguns, set up an alibi, acquired ammunition, repeated the alibi to the police shortly after the crime, and then set off to spend the money which he had acquired through the killings of his parents. Based upon this evidence, it will become apparent that this murder was unlawful, unjustified, and wholly premeditated.
But that's not how the defense sees it. Attorney Leslie Abramson introduces the element of abuse.
Erik Menendez was the abused son of wealthy parents. He killed his parents because he could no longer endure their abuse and had to stop it. When he did that, he unwittingly made himself a threat to everything his parents valued. He put himself in mortal danger. When he sensed that danger was imminent, his instinct to survive took over. Because his parents were wealthy, the prosecution tells you he did it for the money. What do they say when poor kids kill?
Defense attorney Jill Lansing turns the jurors' attention to fear.
The only thing that you are going to have to focus on in this trial is why it happened. And the prosecution has suggested to you that it was done for money. It was done to commit the perfect crime. It was done possibly out of hatred. And what we will prove to you is it was done out of fear.
For the next 5 months, jurors will be plunged into a sweeping family saga that at times will rattle emotions and tempers. But the case of California versus Menendez may turn out to say as much about our changing laws as our family dramas.
Stay tuned for the Menendez brothers on trial, the real story. We now return to the Menendez brothers on trial, the real story.
It was one of the worst things I ever had to do, but it was also one of the best experiences of my life.
The jurors in the Menendez trial didn't really know what they were in for when they were chosen to decide the fate of Erik and Lyle Menendez. For over 5 months, the trial took over their lives. All the publicity made the game of picking jurors trickier. At the Van Nuys courthouse, lawyers questioned over 500 people to ensure the brothers got a fair trial.
Each defendant will have a jury of 12 plus 6 alternates for each defendant.
2 juries, one for each brother, will hear much of the same evidence at the same time in the same courtroom, but will decide their cases separately.
Both juries are present.
What the jurors will learn in this case is that each brother is charged with first-degree murder. 1 count for shooting Jose Menendez, 1 for Kitty Menendez. They are also charged with conspiracy to murder. To get that first-degree murder conviction, which could lead to the death penalty, prosecutors need to prove the brothers calculated the killings, that they premeditated their parents' murder.
Premeditation doesn't require you to be a rocket scientist. It doesn't require you to spend a lot of time. But it's just the idea, if you think about it, you know you shouldn't do it, but you do it anyway.
Pamela Bazanich, prosecuting Lyle, and her colleague Lester Kuriyama, prosecuting Erik, are confident at the start of the trial that they have a sure thing.
The people may call their first witness.
They begin to build their case by calling a series of police officers to describe the brutal scene where Kitty and Jose Menendez were found.
There was a large amount of blood around him and on his clothing, and I also noticed that there was a large portion of the back of his head was missing.
Believing that a shotgun was used here, did you look around that scene to determine whether or not there were any shell casings located in that area?
Yes, I did.
Were there any?
I didn't observe any.
What the jurors will later learn is that the brothers picked up the shell casings immediately following the killings. The state contends that step points to planned murder. The state also calls the medical examiner to testify exactly how the victims died.
Now, as to Mary Louise Menendez, did you determine what the cause of death was?
Yes.
And what was the cause of death?
Multiple shotgun wounds.
He testifies Kitty Menendez was shot repeatedly, once up close, the muzzle pressed to her cheek. And Jose Menendez was also shot several times, including a blast through the back of his head. If prosecutors could prove that the brothers shot their father from behind, or that they were lying in wait, it might be enough to win the toughest element of their case, enough to send the brothers to the gas chamber. But the medical examiner doesn't provide a conclusive answer, and that leaves the door wide open for the defense. Attorney Michael Burt cross-examines the witness.
the fact that the wounds, those wounds to the back of the left and the right arm are in the back, that does not in any way suggest to you that the shooter is necessarily standing behind Jose Menendez when those wounds are inflicted, correct?
That's correct. That's why I say posterior or an anterior instead of back or front. That's correct.
That's a key point for the defense. It will later argue that what took place in the Menendez home was not planned murder, but a violent family explosion. But before the medical examiner leaves the stand, the state provides jurors with a lasting impression. It places photographs into evidence, photographs which turned out to be powerful images for the jurors.
You can see the mother's face shot off. You can see particles hanging out of the legs, and they were large photos, the puddles of blood that you could see. Very destructive. Very.
So it added an extreme emotionality on both sides. One side for murder, and the other side would be, I guess you would say, empathy for the defendants and what had happened to them as a result of their parents.
Prosecutors have another important piece of evidence in their arsenal, the call that Lyle Menendez made to 911 that night.
What's the problem? That's how I killed my parents. Pardon me? What? Who? Are they still there? Yes. The people? No. Were they shot? Yes, man, were they shot? Yes. They were shot? Yes.
The world now knows Lyle Menendez was lying when he called 911 that night.
Sociopaths will lie when the truth will help them. They just don't, they missed out on some sort of gene or hormone or something that makes them know when they're being dishonest, and that's the quality that I see in him.
The state maintains those lies do serious damage to the brothers' credibility and make their actions just before the shootings more suspicious.
You operate the slide.
And so do the shotguns. 2 days before they killed their parents, the brothers bought 2 big guns, 12-gauge shotguns like this one. The real ones were never found. They bought the guns with a false ID in San Diego, hours away from Beverly Hills. According to the state, it was all part of a plan. Prosecutors continued to build their murder theory by trying to show that the brothers devised an alibi before they shot their parents on Sunday night.
My name is Perry Scott Berman.
The state calls Perry Berman,
B-E-R-M-A-N.
friend and former tennis coach of the brothers. Prosecutor Lester Kuriyama questions Berman about a phone call Lyle made to him the afternoon before the shooting.
What was the nature of that conversation?
That Lyle wanted to get together that evening, and I told him that I had plans to go to the Taste of L.A., which is a food festival at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, and I was going with a friend of mine, and that he was more than welcome to join us. We know with Erik, of course.
And how did he respond to that?
He said that he had plans with Erik to go to see Batman, the movie Batman.
And did you agree to meet sometime later that night?
Oh, yes. Lyle said that he would come after the movie was over, that the two boys, Lyle and Erik, would go to the Taste of L.A. around 9:30 that evening, and I stayed until about 10:15.
But Berman says he and the brothers never met at the food festival. Later that evening, Berman received another call from Lyle Menendez. It's the next question that's a pivotal one for the state.
Did Lyle Menendez tell you what time he arrived at the Taste of L.A. that night when he called you sometime after 11?
I believe it was said a little after 10:15.
That he arrived at the Taste of L.A.?
Right.
10 or 10:15 is the same time that neighbors estimate the shootings took place. But is that evidence that those phone calls were part of a scheme planned ahead of time by the brothers to make Perry Berman their alibi? The defense finds the state's conclusions absurd.
They planned to have Perry Berman have a place to be that night where they could meet him. That's ridiculous. That was a social date. It's made Sunday afternoon. If this is planned in advance of the purchase of the guns on Friday, which is the prosecution's theory, how did they know that Perry Berman would be available to be a potential alibi? That's ludicrous. It's a last-minute social plan.
We have more than that. I mean, we have the purchase of the guns, the alibi, the ammunition, all that other stuff. The things that are the conspiracy are the elements of the premeditation.
So far, prosecutors have provided jurors with a theory of how the crimes were committed. But the question still remains, why? The state's theory, the brothers acted out of hate and greed. in the hopes of inheriting the family fortune estimated around $8 million.
Something about the transaction, and especially when we got to the point of make sure it looked like you hadn't been here, made my spine crawl.
2 computer experts are called to testify that they went to the Menendez house after the shootings to check the status of the parents' will on the family computer.
Did you have any conversation with the defendant?
Well, he was asking me some questions as you're going on, wondering if files were deleted, can you retrieve them?
No will was ever found. Meanwhile, according to prosecutors, the brothers took advantage of Beverly Hills, going on a shopping spree within days of the shootings.
What kind of shopping did you do with him aside from homes and vehicles?
We went clothes shopping. He bought suits and shoes, shirts, ties. We went shopping for tennis equipment, tennis rackets, sports sneakers, and outerwear.
Lyle Menendez hired a bodyguard and bought a Porsche, expensive watches, and a restaurant in Princeton. Erik Menendez postponed college and hired a tennis coach for $60,000 a year.
Or do you just have evidence that...
To the state, which spent hours presenting evidence about the brothers' spending to the jurors, their behavior seemed suspicious. But would jurors buy that murder for money theory?
The only thing they could prove was post-crime spending. Well, these people were millionaires. They spent money like that every day of their lives. Now, I know that they have no responsibility to prove a motive, but it sure helps for me to have a motive to convict someone of first-degree murder.
But the prosecution isn't done yet. There's still the question of a confession made to the brothers' therapist, Dr. Jerome Oziel. What happened here in Oziel's office, and whether the jury will get to hear the whole story, could be crucial to the state's case.
Stay tuned for the Menendez brothers on trial, the real story. We now return to the Menendez brothers on trial, the real story.
Inside this office, some shocking revelations were made.
I asked him, you mean you killed your parents? He said yes.
In a soap opera twist, this man, Dr. Jerome Oziel, has become the focus of the case of California versus Menendez. Erik Menendez was still being treated by Oziel after his parents were killed, still publicly denying his involvement. But then one day, outside of Oziel's office, Erik Menendez confessed, and Oziel, in turn, confided that conversation to his lover.
I am the only other person in his, in his life outside of lawyers and other psychologists that was told.
Her name is Judalon Smith. It was Judalon Smith who eventually decided to blow the whistle on the brothers.
I tried to give the information that I had that would, lead them to be able to make an arrest. And some of that information was about they had purchased the guns with the phony ID, and the purchase was made in San Diego.
On that surprising tip, the Menendez brothers were arrested. But just as startling was another revelation. Dr. Oziel had a tape recording of the brothers confessing.
I'm not going to comment on what the impact of this kind of evidence may or may not have.
For 3 years, the defense waged an all-out legal war to keep Dr. Oziel and his tape out of court, arguing the psychologist broke the patient-therapist privilege. But the prosecution argued that the privilege did not apply because the doctor claimed Lyle threatened him, thereby allowing Oziel to break his silence. And the prosecution won. The California Supreme Court ruled that Dr. Oziel could be called to testify about his sessions with the brothers.
The notion that that man is dicking with the lives of other people is so offensive It's so wrong. God, I hope they get his license.
We're ready to resume with the trial.
After years of legal acrobatics, Dr. Jerome Oziel takes the stand to tell jurors what the brothers told him.
Now, would you describe for the jurors what steps in planning the murders that Erik recounted to you in this session?
Well, Erik relayed to me that at the point that he and Lyle had discussed planning the murder, that Erik felt a need to commit the murder relatively quickly, or he basically thought that he would lose the emotional ability to commit the act. Lyle, according to Erik's recounting, wanted to take some time to plan it out more effectively to make sure that it was as perfect as could be.
Did Erik Menendez tell you what occurred at the crime scene as they were shooting their parents?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
Erik told me that his father said something like no, no, and turned away and was shot as he was saying that. And the mother was, I think, shot second, and I guess began to stand or something of that nature, and was shot and then fell to the ground. And he relayed to me that the father, as I recall it, died first, and the mother did not die with the first shots that were fired at her, and that what happened at that point is that both Erik and Lyle went outside to get some more cartridges and reloaded the shotguns, and went in, and Lyle, I believe, finished murdering their mother.
Did Erik Menendez describe for you what his mother was doing on the floor that necessitated them having to reload the shotguns?
Yes, he did.
What did he say to you?
He said that she was moaning and trying to crawl.
Oziel's testimony about the killings mesmerized the courtroom. Then prosecutors turned to a critical question: motive.
They were concluding that they really didn't kill their parents for money, but out of the hatred that they had, in particular towards their father, and to be free from all of the abusive and onerous characteristics that the father had.
Did you ask them about their mother?
Yes, I did.
And did you ask them why they killed their mother?
Yes, I did.
And what was the explanation given to you?
The mother was a witness, and if in fact they left the mother alive, they couldn't think of any way to be able to kill the father and escape detection.
Instead of testifying the brothers killed out of greed, Oziel has emphasized a different prosecution motive: hatred.
Did either defendant ever tell you during the October 31st and November 2nd session that they killed their parents in self-defense?
No, they did not.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Dr. Oziel didn't ask Erik Menendez to come in and confess. Erik Menendez came in and confessed to him.
Under direct examination for only 4 hours, Dr. Oziel has made a convincing witness. But that's before defense attorney Leslie Abramson got a hold of him.
He's the sociopath in the case, the clear-cut sociopath, and he has the nerve to tell me in interview that Jose Menendez was the worst sociopath I've ever seen. He's the worst. Do you think your sessions with Erik and Lyle Menendez on October 31st were critical?
Yes, I did.
How about the session on November 2nd? Was that critical?
Yes, it was.
You didn't make any notes whatsoever during those sessions. Isn't that true?
I certainly did not.
The defense may have a point. Oziel's memory may not be reliable, even though Oziel did dictate his comments 2 weeks later. Abramson then does battle on a second front, questioning Dr. Oziel's claim that he was in fear for his life.
Well, did it occur to you to call the police?
It occurred to me to call the police, and I decided that if I called the police, I might be killed.
Police were going to kill you?
No, Erik or Lyle was going to kill me.
Let him respond.
Abramson doesn't hide her contempt for the witness, and the tension in the courtroom throughout the 6 days of cross-examination is electric.
Is that right?
You're not letting me answer, Ms. Abramson.
I'm going to object to that answer, Your Honor. This witness has been trying to do this.
Objection is overruled.
Dr. Oziel, can you answer the question I asked you? Do you think you're able to do that?
The distractions were very, very heavy. You had to keep focused that we were sitting there on a murder trial, not looking at a soap opera or something.
But Attorney Abramson succeeds in making Oziel's affair with Judalon Smith and other questions about his character the main attraction.
You start having a sexual relationship with her, and after about a month of that, you want to get away from her.
Something like that.
Did you give her therapy during the time that you knew her?
Absolutely not.
Did you ever give her drugs?
Absolutely not.
She sued you claiming that, didn't she?
She claimed it.
You settled the lawsuit, didn't you?
I didn't settle it, no.
Your insurer did.
The insurance company settled it, but I have a pending claim against Ms. Smith.
We heard more about Oziel and Judalon Smith and their relationship than we did about Kitty and Jose.
This has got to be one of the least credible, least honest people I have ever had the pleasure of witnessing.
Defense attorney Leslie Abramson has raised some troubling questions about Oziel. But should questions about his personal life affect his sworn testimony about the shootings?
I think the defense wants this to be the Jerome Oziel trial because I think they want to set up a diversion so that we all forget that this is a murder trial and think that it's a really cheap version of divorce court. But that's not what this is about.
All right, then the people may call their next witness.
There's another witness who the state thinks can help focus attention on the brothers' act. He used to be Erik Menendez's best friend and confidant.
Did you have any information about Erik's plans to be an actor?
Yeah, well, we used to write the screenplays with the intent of him becoming an actor.
Craig Signorelli and Erik wrote a screenplay together about a son killing his parents for money. The jurors won't get to hear about that, but they do get to hear about a conversation he had with Erik.
He said that he went back outside and his brother was standing there with 2 shotguns and said, "Let's do it." And they walked inside and Lyle was standing, or Erik went up to the door on the left, which was slightly open, and the door on the right, Lyle went up and put his shoulder against the door on the right, and Erik said he looked in and saw his parents sitting on the couch, and Lyle swung the door open and shot his father and looked at Erik and said, "Shoot, Mom," and Erik said he shot his mom as she was standing up and yelling.
But on cross-examination, defense attorney Abramson goes after Signorelli.
Now, didn't you guys play mind games with each other all the time?
Yes.
It was an aspect of your friendship, wasn't it?
That's why I said it could have happened to the police, because
Because-
I wasn't sure at the time if what he was telling me the truth, and I did not want to be the one to turn him in.
So you didn't know if he was playing a mind game or not?
That's correct.
After nearly 4 weeks of testimony and 29 witnesses, the state rests its case, painting the Menendez brothers as cold-blooded, calculating killers. In the weeks to come, that theory will be put to the test.
Stay tuned for the Menendez brothers on trial, the real story. We now return to the Menendez brothers on trial, the real story.
When the Menendez brothers first appeared in court back in 1990, when they were charged with the crime of killing their parents, they came well-dressed and with what seemed like a smug attitude. But in the last 3 years, the brothers went through some changes. Gone are the suits and ties and swagger, replaced by what some call a schoolboy look, complete with sweaters in a variety of pastel colors.
I know we're all attuned to calling them boys, but they're not. They're grown men.
Whether it's part of the defense strategy or not, the brothers appear in court every day looking more like youths than vicious murderers. Leslie Abramson says they are the victims.
The whole case has really to do with people who are not leading a straight and honest life, both parents and children, both before and after. And in trying to figure out what's really going on, you really have to look at clues.
Those clues start with providing a snapshot of what life was like growing up as the sons of Kitty and Jose Menendez.
My name is Marta, M-A-R-T-A, Menendez Canos.
The defense begins its case by calling Marta Cano to the stand, Jose Menendez's sister. She testifies about her memories of the early years.
With Erik, it was totally ignored unless he was doing something that Jose didn't like, and then he would just get up from the social gathering and say, Erik, very strongly, and go grab him, pull him, bring him, put him between his knees, and then he would squat and hold him on the shoulder and say, listen to me. And Erik would cry instantly. The instant the father would touch him, he would start crying. He said, stop crying. I tell you to stop crying. Why can't you stop crying? And he kept on yelling at the kid, and of course Erik would cry more.
Do you remember ever seeing Kitty intercede with Jose's belittling or berating or making fun of Erik?
No.
What was it she said she felt about her children?
She told me she wished they would have never been born because they had broken her marriage.
Jose Menendez's sister is not the only one to portray Jose as tyrannical and Kitty as unstable.
I'm a school teacher.
The defense calls a parade of teachers, friends, and coaches who paint a dark picture of the family.
Did you think that your remaining as their coach had any impact upon Lyle or Erik's well-being?
Yes.
And what impact did you think your being there had?
Well, I thought it was about all they had.
And there was more testimony from relatives.
And he wanted his children to succeed. Most parents do, but he was relentless, you know. I mean, it was going to be done, period. And I think he forgot to ask the children if that's what they wanted.
You could hear the you can hear the bell.
And would you see bruises on
Yes.
the boys after that?
Yes, and they're above their thigh area.
The impact of that testimony left some jurors shocked and surprised that so many people say they saw abuse and mistreatment in the Menendez household. But abuse is not enough to make a claim of self-defense. For self-defense, lawyers must prove the brothers pulled the triggers out of fear that their parents would kill them. What could possibly have made two grown young men so frightened? Only the brothers know, and now they must reveal what they say are their deepest secrets.
Joseph Lyle Menendez, M-E-N-E-N-D-E-Z.
Attorney Jill Lansing begins by asking Lyle Menendez a direct question.
Did you love your mom and dad?
Yes.
And on August 20th, 1989, did you and your brother kill your mother and father?
Yes.
Did you kill them for money? Is that no?
No.
Did you kill them because you wanted to pay them back for the way they had treated you?
Excuse me, I reject that as being
Overruled. No.
Why did you kill your parents?
Because we were afraid.
Do you have a lot of nice memories from your childhood?
No.
Between the ages of 6 and 8, did your father have sexual contact with you?
Yes.
And how did it start?
Just started with, after sports practices, he would massage me, and we would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would touch him, and we would undress.
Where would this take place?
In my bedroom. Just became more involved.
What do you mean more involved?
We would be in the bathroom, and he would put me on my knees, and he would guide me, all my movements, and I would have oral sex with him.
Did you want to do this? What else did he do to you?
He used objects,
What kind of objects?
a toothbrush, and some sort of shaving utensil brush. He'd have a tube of Vaseline, and he just played with me.
And did he try to anally penetrate you with something else?
He did.
And what was it?
He raped me.
Did you cry?
Yes.
Did you bleed?
Yes.
Were you scared?
Very.
Did you ask him not to?
Yes.
How did you ask him not to?
I just told him, I don't. I just told him that I didn't want to do this, and that it hurt me. And he said that he didn't mean to hurt me, and he loved me.
Was that important to you, that he loved you?
Yes, very. But I still didn't want to do it.
Did you tell your mom?
Yes. She told me to stop it, and that I was exaggerating, and that my dad has to punish me when I do things wrong. And she told me that he loved me.
What did he tell you about telling people?
He just said that it was our secret, that bad things would happen to me if I told anybody. And I told him I never would.
Did you tell your brother? Did you do something to your brother?
Yes.
What did you do to your brother?
I took him out to the woods whenever I felt, I don't know, I took him out sometimes, and I took a toothbrush also, and I played with Erik in the same way. And I'm sorry.
When you were about 13, did you think that it might be happening to someone else?
Yes.
And who did you think it was happening to?
Erik. He told me that Erik was, that Erik made things up sometimes, but that it would stop. And we should keep it just between us, or he'd kill me.
Did you ever tell anybody what you thought was going on?
No, I told him I would never tell anybody. I just wanted to stop.
You slept in bed with your mom a lot, didn't you, even when you were little?
Yes,
Would your dad be in bed?
sometimes.
And where would you touch her?
Everywhere.
Did she touch you back?
She kissed me, but she didn't touch me.
And how long did these things go on for?
Until I was 13, a little bit farther than that.
After hiding secrets like this for so long, when they came out, seemed like it all came out in a rush, and it seemed completely understandable under those circumstances. So yes, I did believe it.
I don't think that if you kill your parents, that it would be very hard for you to cry because you have killed them, regardless of why you killed them.
What these jurors will spend hours debating is how much of Lyle Menendez's story they can believe, and if believed, whether the abuse he describes explains what happened on August 20th, 1989.
We now return to the Menendez brothers on trial, the real story.
I like him very much. I think that there's an incredibly good core there that, for reasons I don't understand, they didn't manage to ruin.
I think he's pretty much a garden variety sociopathic murderer.
As the case of California against Menendez unfolds, the lines between the opposing sides couldn't be clearer. Both the state and defense have a lot riding on this case. For the state, murder one convictions. And for the defense, their clients' lives.
Your next witness?
The Erik Menendez defense, Your Honor, calls Erik Menendez.
The defense strategy has been to take the brothers' story of abuse and use it as a basis for why they should be acquitted.
Erik Galen Menendez.
It's a strategy that relies in large part on the brothers themselves. Leslie Abramson gets right to the point.
What do you believe was the originating cause of you and your brother ultimately winding up shooting your parents?
Me telling.
You telling what?
Me telling Lyle that,
You telling Lyle what? Was it you telling Lyle about something that was happening?
My dad.
Okay.
My dad had been molesting me.
How long did that go on?
12 years.
And were there episodes of sexual activity with your father over that last summer?
Yes.
How did you feel at 18 about the fact that your father was having sex with you?
I hated it. I hated it. I hated it.
And what did you think your options were with respect to sex with your father?
Options? I had no options.
Had you ever tried to end the sex through confrontation or violence against your father?
Yes.
Yes? You were violent towards your father?
Oh, no, not violence, no. But I said no to him once.
You said no once.
Yes.
How old were you when you said no?
I was 17.
On that particular occasion, after you said no, did your father become upset?
Yes.
And did he do anything violent?
Yes.
And would you just tell us not what happened, but Just generically, what violent things did he do?
He threw me on the bed and went to get a knife and put it at my throat.
Erik Menendez, who reveals that he's currently on a tranquilizer, recounts how his father forced him to engage in different kinds of sex. He recalls that as a child, he made up names for the acts: knees, rough sex, nice sex, and sex.
Did rough sex involve your father hurting you with things?
Yes.
And what kind of things was he hurting you with?
Needles, pins, tacks.
What was he doing with the needles? Excuse me?
Rope.
What was he doing with the needles and the pins and the tacks, generally?
He was sticking them into my thighs and my butt.
Did your mother ever come upon you when you were crying?
Sometimes after these, I'd have to go downstairs to dinner, or afterwards, and she would come when she'd see me crying, and,
Did
yes.
she ever ask you, Erik, what are you crying about?
No.
Would she ask you that sometimes if you were crying and it had nothing to do with sex with your father?
Sometimes, but often when I was crying, it was apparent why I was crying.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, I would be crying at the swimming pool, or I'd be crying coming from school, and then she'd ask me what was wrong. But if it was from sports or just from coming out of my room, she wouldn't ask me.
If you don't buy the sexual abuse, I can see how it would be really hard to understand the rest of it.
How do you prove abuse? That's a tough obstacle for the defense.
I couldn't find any hard evidence. The only thing I heard was testimony. It was verbal words. It was verbiage.
At different points in the trial, the defense decides to fight that problem by calling witnesses who might be able to confirm the abuse. Dr. Carrie English reviewed the brothers' medical records and notes one incident in particular involving an injury to Erik Menendez's throat.
Opinion as to what type of child sexual abuse could have resulted in that particular complaint?
Oral copulation.
But among all of their many records, there is no specific notation of sexual abuse. What may be more powerful evidence is supplied by cousins. One testifies about Lyle Menendez.
He proceeded to indicate to me by touching himself down and saying that his dad and him had been touching each other down there.
Another is a cousin called to testify about Erik Menendez.
He told me his father was massaging his dick.
He used that word?
Yes, he did.
To further bolster their case, the defense introduces photographs. Photos of naked boys found on a roll of pictures taken on Erik's 6th birthday. The brothers say the photos were taken by their father.
This is a production. A trial is a production. People say that it's a search for the truth, but I've yet to see a trial that really resembled a search for the truth more than it is a production. And a trial is a production.
The question jurors are left with is this: are the Menendez brothers telling the truth? And even if they are, so what? The defense still has to draw a map for the jurors, a map that shows how the alleged abuse sparked what happened that night back in August of 1989. The key will be fear, and when we return, we'll help you figure out whether the brothers were planning a cold-blooded murder or preparing to defend themselves.
Stay tuned for the Menendez brothers on trial, the real story.